Exposed, the heartwarming journey of 3,000 sailors facing the incredible challenges of the Drake. Jack Thompson stared out the bus window, his heart racing as the salty wind whipped past. Home. The small coastal town he'd left behind for the vast ocean was finally within reach. Trees whispered secrets, and the salty scent of the sea mingled with the asphalt as memories washed over him: childhood laughter, sun-soaked summers, and the warmth of his mother's embrace. But the excitement that swelled in his chest soon tightened into a knot of fear. What awaited him was not the joyful reunion he yearned for, but economic despair clinging to the streets like fog. Turning away from the window, he glanced around at his fellow sailors, their faces a mixture of hope and uncertainty. Together, they had braved storms on the USS Drake, yet now, standing on his home turf, he felt like a stranger among the people he'd loved. The whispers of skepticism from the townsfolk echoed in his ears, painting a picture of outsiders who'd only returned to shake up an already precarious balance. As he stepped off the bus, the town's familiar buildings loomed over him, dusty and cracked. Where there once were bustling shops and bright smiles, shadows stretched out from boarded-up windows, remnants of a community hit hard by layoffs and despair. But hope flickered in the distance. The local shipyard, once a source of pride, was set to reopen under new management. This was it. A chance to restore dignity for veterans like him. However, as Jack learned over coffee with his mother, a corporate titan with plans to strip the yard of its soul threatened everything. The realization crashed down on him like a rogue wave, washing away the optimism he'd held on to. Could they let this happen? His heart surged with anger, igniting a fire deep within him. Before we continue, I need to let you know about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system, and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, hit that bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can drop a like, it really helps me with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, let me know in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. As he rallied his fellow veterans to protect the shipyard, Jack's father stood in the way, a barrier of hardened ideals. The man who had taught him the value of hard work saw Jack's protests as rebellion. During a heated argument, words were thrown like daggers, leaving wounds that would not easily heal. Jack felt fragmented, alone in his fight against the tide of indifference. The night of the town hall meeting hung heavy with tension. Jack's heart raced as he stood up to speak, feeling all eyes on him. We are not just sailors. We are sons, daughters, and community members. This shipyard is our heartbeat. His voice rang out, echoing among the crowd. But murmurs of doubt twisted in the air. Were they ready to fight? Just as he finished, news broke from the corporation, an ultimatum that could shape their fate. Would the town rally behind him, or would they fade into the shadows, swallowed by fear? Jack's heart pounded in his chest, desperate for an answer, both for himself and the bond with a father who couldn't see the world through his eyes. As the meeting buzzed with uncertainty, the line between victory and defeat blurred, leaving Jack wondering if he'd lose everything he fought for, including his own family. The atmosphere in the town hall was thick with anticipation. Jack sat down, his hands shaking slightly as he gripped the edge of the table. Across the room, he could see his father's expression, a mix of disappointment and concern. The family bond that once kept them tight now felt like a fraying thread ready to snap. As the meeting pressed on, voices rose and fell like the tides. Townsfolk who had once been bright-eyed and full of dreams now leaned into the shadows of doubt. They exchanged glances, whispers curling around them like smoke. Jack's heart sank. He knew the weight of the world rested on their shoulders, but did they? A man in a crisp suit stood before the crowd, the corporate spokesperson sent to deliver the ultimatum. With a clipboard as a shield, he detailed the plans for the shipyard. This is a golden opportunity, he said, his tone slick with charisma. We bring jobs and new technology. Change is progress. Through clenched teeth, Jack muttered under his breath. Progress? At what cost? It felt like a slap in the face to hear this outsider speak of change as if it mended broken hearts and empty pockets. Just then, a familiar face broke through the crowd, Sarah, the spirit of the town itself, who had spent every summer on the beach with him as kids. Her vibrant smile was now tinged with worry. "What are we going to do?" she asked quietly, her voice barely above a whisper. Jack took a deep breath, rallying his thoughts. This wasn't just about the shipyard. This was about them, about home. "We fight," he said, the words coming out stronger than he felt. "We show them what this shipyard means to us. To our families, our history." More murmurs surged through the crowd, a wave of shifting emotions. Hope flickered again, but it was accompanied by fear of losing what they had, of disrupting the fragile foundations of their lives. As the meeting wrapped up, tensions lingered. Discussions were promised, alliances were made, but Jack couldn't shake the feeling of impending conflict. They were up against a giant, one that had resources and influence, but the heart of a small town could be a powerful force if united. Later that evening, Jack found himself wandering the empty streets, his footsteps echoing in the quiet night. He landed at the docks, the very place that had been a second home to him. The salty air filled his lungs and ignited a sense of purpose. As he stood there, gazing out at the waves crashing against the pier, he realized what he needed to do next. Gathering his fellow sailors, they set up a meeting at the old Fisherman's Club the next morning. Jack needed to turn their raw energy into action, to forge a plan together that would resonate beyond the walls of the town hall. When the sun rose, painting the sky in hues of orange and pink, Jack felt a spark. He couldn't do this alone anymore. They were in this together, and together they could create something stronger. But as he turned to head home, an unsettling thought crept in. What if the corporation made their move before they could act? Time was slipping away, and they needed to solidify their unity before it was too late. The looming threat was real. Would they stand tall as a community, or would they be crushed under the weight of change? Jack's resolve hardened. It was now or never. A fight was brewing, and everything they held dear was on the line. As he lay in bed that night, exhaustion washed over him, but sleep wouldn't come. His thoughts raced, and a sense of urgency seeped into his bones. They needed a strategy, a way to mobilize everyone before the storm hit. What would happen in the tense days ahead? Would they find a way to defy the giant looming over them, or would they be swept away, their town's legacy eroding like sand beneath the waves? The morning sun broke through the horizon, casting long shadows over Jack as he prepared for the meeting. He could already hear the distant shouts and laughter of sailors gathering at the Fisherman's Club, a familiar sound that once filled his heart with joy but now stirred something different, determination. The air outside was charged with a sense of urgency, each sailor's heart beating in sync with the rising tide. As Jack stepped through the old wooden doors, memories rushed back, children darting around, laughter mingling with the smell of salt and fish. But today was different. The room was buzzing with anxious energy, faces that once greeted him with smiles now wore brows furrowed with worry. Jack took a deep breath and stepped onto the creaky platform. Silence fell, the murmur dying as eyes turned to him. What do you say to a group that feels they might lose everything? Thank you for coming, he started, his voice steadying. We all know why we're here. The shipyard, our home, our future, is under threat. He paused, letting the weight of his words settle in. But we are not alone in this battle. They might be big and powerful, but we carry a spirit that no corporation can crush. Cheers erupted in the room, echoing off the walls. Some raised their fists. The fire of hope was rekindled but had not yet swallowed the fear whole. Jack scanned the crowd, locking eyes with Sarah. She smiled, a flicker of courage. Together, we need a plan. We have skills, connections, and passion. Let us use that. Let us show them the power we hold as a community. Voices stirred with suggestions. One sailor shouted, "Let us organize a town-wide rally." Another chimed in, we could gather stories from all those who've worked at the shipyard. Share the history. As ideas flew about the room, Jack felt the tide begin to turn. They were buzzing with energy, and it gave him strength. But beneath that enthusiasm, an unsettling thought lingered. Time was short. We need to act quickly while we still can, he said, cutting through the excitement. We should start reaching out to the media, grab their attention before the corporation gets to us. We need to be a united front. A collective nod swept through the crowd. They were ready to fight, but there was still worry etched on many of their faces. Doubt lingered like an unwelcome guest. Jack sensed it, fanning the flames of his own uncertainty. Would they be enough? He had their hearts, but did he have their trust? As the meeting wrapped, a sense of urgency filled the air. Plans took shape: a rally next week, phone calls to local reporters, signs to be made. But with every new task came the reminder of pending danger. Jack left the Fisherman's Club with Sarah by his side, their footsteps echoing on the pavement. "You really think this will work?" she asked, her voice a mix of hope and hesitation. "I have to believe that it will," he replied, glancing at the ocean, its waves reflective of turmoil. "If we're going to save what we have, we need to believe in each other." That night, as he sat at his kitchen table, the worries crept back in. Images of the corporate stickers plastered over the shipyard flashed in his mind. How far would they go to push their agenda? What if they didn't get to the media in time? As Jack stared out the window at the familiar skyline, a fire bloomed in his chest. They had to act fast. They had to be brave, but would they truly come together, or would the tides of change wash them away? The next morning would be crucial. Would they rally as one, or would rifts begin to show? Could they band their hearts and voices against the tide in time? The clock was ticking, and Jack could feel the storm brewing on the horizon. The morning sun peeked through Jack's window, sending rays that danced across his kitchen table. He felt a sense of urgency wrap around him like a heavy cloak. Today was the day they faced the battle head-on, and the stakes couldn't be clearer. As he poured himself a cup of coffee, the bitter smell flooded his senses, stirring his resolve. He ran a finger over the edges of a weathered newspaper lying nearby, its headline reading "Shipyard's Future Uncertain." He wished he could simply crumple it up and toss it away, but instead, it served as a painful reminder of their fight. Each sip of coffee brought clarity. Jack needed to put one foot in front of the other. "Ready?" Sarah's voice broke through his thoughts, dragging him back to the present. She stood by the door, her hair catching the light, making her appear almost ethereal. Her determination sparked something deep within him. "Yeah, let us do this," he replied, grabbing a sign he'd hastily painted the night before. It read, "Our shipyard, our future." The letters were a bit crooked, but they didn't need to be perfect, they just needed to speak from the heart. As they walked toward the Fisherman's Club, the streets felt heavier than usual. More people were out, whispers of their plan filling the air. Jack felt the weight of each pair of eyes watching him, gauging his strength. He could see the faces of sailors and their families, all eager yet nervous. Would they really come together? Upon arriving, Jack and Sarah were greeted by the sight of a growing crowd gathered outside the club. Excitement mingled with trepidation, creating an electric atmosphere. People were holding signs, some were chatting while others tried to calm their anxious children. The camaraderie was palpable, and Jack could feel the tide turning once more. "All right, listen up," he shouted, managing to cut through the crowd's chatter. Instantly, eyes turned to him, faces steadying in anticipation. "Today, we take a stand. We gather our voices and share our stories. We are more than just workers, we are community, family." Cheers erupted, filling him with determination. Gritting his teeth, Jack pressed on. "We'll march through town, stop at City Hall, and demand they listen." The sea of people responded with shouts of agreement, the fear that lingered only moments before beginning to dissipate. Jack clasped Sarah's hand, feeling her unyielding support next to him. He could almost sense the tide of change slowly rising within them. As they set off, Jack saw familiar faces among the crowd. Karen, who had worked at the shipyard for over 20 years, Miguel, with his 2 young daughters clinging to his side, and even old Mr. Thompson, who always swapped tall tales over fish and chips. They were there because they believed, all together against the looming storm. Yet, as they marched, doubt crept back in. What would happen when the corporation hit back? What if today's bravery faltered in the face of bigger threats? Jack's pace slowed, the goal ahead growing foggy. But Sarah squeezed his hand tighter, a reassuring anchor amid his doubts. We can't let fear dictate our actions, Jack. We're doing this for our families, for our home. Her words resonated deep within him. They were more than individuals fighting a fight, they were a community, driven by a shared love for their way of life. Stay focused. Jack shouted back to the group, and their energy surged in response. As they reached the steps of City Hall, the sun broke free from behind the clouds, illuminating their path. Jack stepped forward, determined to make their voices heard. But just as he was about to speak, a town official ambled out, irritation etched on his face, and in that moment, Jack's heart raced. Would they listen? Would they acknowledge the people standing there, rallying for their future? The moment of truth was at hand. Would their unity echo through the halls of power, or would their cries be drowned out by the corporate thunder approaching on the horizon? Jack steadied himself, ready to speak, when the official raised a hand, silencing the crowd. The tension felt like a tightrope stretched above an abyss. What do you want? The man asked gruffly, brows furrowing in annoyance. Jack took a breath, feeling the collective heartbeat of his community pulsing beside him. We want you to listen. He shouted back, raising his sign high. We want to save the shipyard. Our jobs. Our future. The crowd exploded with cheers, their voices weaving together in a tapestry of hope. The official eyed the crowd, shifting uncomfortably under the weight of their demand. Jack could see his authority waver as the sea of faces determined, fierce, and united demanded to be heard. With every heartbeat, Jack felt a flicker of hope that maybe, just maybe, today would be different, but something in the official's stance reminded Jack of the corporate machines they were up against, cold, unyielding, and indifferent to the human cost. Would this man be an ally or another barrier? I have a job to do, the official huffed, clearly trying to regain his composure. You think you can just stand here and change fate? Jack felt the fire quicken in his chest. No one is asking for fate to change. He snapped. We're asking for a voice. This shipyard isn't just a business, it's our home. It's where we grew up, where our families work, where our dreams are forged. He looked out over those familiar faces, the tired eyes of parents, the curious looks of children. You've got to understand, this is the lifeblood of our community. It's not just about profit margins and bottom lines. It's about our lives. The murmurs in the crowd grew louder. A mother held her child a little closer, and Jack could see the connection, the emotion woven into their fight. Just then, Karen stepped forward, her face lit with unwavering resolve. You think we'll back down? Look at us. We're here because we matter. We deserve a future. A wave of energy surged through the crowd, each voice lifted in solidarity. The official faltered for a brief moment, his gaze darting between them as if grappling with an invisible force. Sarah stepped up beside Jack, and together they held the sign above their heads, as if it was a banner of hope. We'll keep coming back until you listen. She declared, her voice strong, echoing Jack's heart. But just as momentum reached its peak, a sudden commotion rippled through the crowd. A group of corporate representatives emerged, their sharp suits and clipped expressions cutting through the warmth of the gathering like ice. They were there to intimidate, to snuff out the flame igniting in the hearts of the people. Jack's stomach dropped. They were the storm Jack feared. He could feel the air grow heavy with uncertainty as whispers filled the spaces left by the previous cheers. Would they still stand firm, or would this presence break their spirit? Here come the sharks, Jack muttered to Sarah, frustration seeping into his voice. Her grip tightened around his hand. "Stay strong. Remember, we're not alone. We face them together." He nodded, gathering what strength he could. "All right, everyone. We need to show them we won't back down." He raised his voice once more, hoping to rally the troops against the very real threat that was now looming before them. But in that moment, Jack felt something shift within him, a resolve solidified by the fear, by the doubts, and by a fierce love for his community. Just as he prepared to charge ahead, a voice from the back of the crowd cut through the rumble of anxiety. "What if they're right? What if we can't win?" The murmurs of doubt traveled through him like a ripple, and for a heartbeat, Jack faltered. Could he face the repercussions they were all about to endure? As the corporate representatives approached, the stakes rose higher. Would their voices remain strong against the coming storm, or would the weight of intimidation crush their dreams? Jack took a deep breath, confronting the challenge before him once more, but the question loomed stark in the air: what would happen next? Jack's heart raced as the corporate representatives advanced. Their slick shoes echoed ominously on the pavement, a sound that sent shivers through the crowd. He felt the collective doubt creeping in, like a fog threatening to smother their spirit. But amidst the shadows of uncertainty, he anchored himself in his community's resolve. "Listen up," he shouted, his voice cutting through the fear. "These suits think they can intimidate us. They think we're just numbers on a spreadsheet. But we're not. We're families. We're friends. We're the heartbeat of this shipyard." The crowd roared, energy sparking anew. Jack could feel it. Every cheer, every fist raised was like a heartbeat, pulsing hope back into the air. He glanced at Sarah, whose gaze was unwavering, and at Karen, who stood with her arms crossed, defiantly ready to fight back. This was their fortress, and they weren't going to let it crumble without a fight. The lead corporate representative, a man with slicked back hair and piercing blue eyes, smirked, dismissing Jack with a wave of his hand. "Do you really think your antics will affect any real change?" he drawled, his tone oozing condescension. "The shipyard's fate is already sealed." Jack's stomach clenched as those words landed like concrete. The air grew colder around them. But he refused to buckle under the weight of despair. "No. You don't get to decide that." He took a step forward, the crowd instinctively parting behind him. "This shipyard is worth fighting for, worth believing in. We deserve a chance." The murmur of agreement rippled through the crowd, igniting a flicker of passionate resistance. A father held his son up high, his little arms waving a homemade sign that read, "Save our jobs." Jack's chest swelled with pride at the sight. This was the reason he had started the movement, to protect the future of his neighbors, to ensure that their dreams were not just swept aside. "Look around you," Jack called out, sweeping his arms wide. "These aren't just workers. These are our lives. Our stories. You can't just take that away." His eyes darted between the corporate team. "What's your plan? To cut us out and drive your profits higher? To what end?" The crowd was stirring again, a nervous energy rising like a wave ready to crash. Karen stepped forward, her voice trembling with emotion. "We're not going to fade away quietly. You can't ignore us. We'll fight for every single job, every dream, every life intertwined with this shipyard." Jack's heart raced at her words, each one fired with passion and truth. There was something raw, something powerful about her plea. But as another corporate representative stepped forward, his expression hardened, the beautiful resolve of the crowd felt like it might crack. "You think you can win this fight? You have no idea what you're up against. There are forces at play that you can't even begin to comprehend." A murmur of confusion spread through the crowd, but Jack quickly intervened. "We know exactly what's at stake. We're the backbone of this town. We're the ones who make this shipyard thrive." The tide of solidarity pushed against the fear, but that deep-seated dread still lingered. Jack could feel it in his gut, the suffocating doubt that came with the reality of what lay ahead. The corporate machine was big and ruthless, and he wondered briefly if they were in over their heads. Could they truly stand against such power? Doesn't it matter how big your machine is? Jack shouted, his voice a thunderclap of defiance. People are stronger than profits. As the crowd began to chant, Jack noticed a flicker of uncertainty in the corporate man's eyes. Maybe, just maybe, their fight had begun to chip away at the facade of indifference, but even as hope blossomed, a darker realization settled in Jack's heart. This was just the beginning of their battle. The corporate machine would come back harder. And then came a whisper from behind a newcomer with a familiar face. "Jack, you'll want to see this." His heart raced again, but this time not just from the fight. What could it possibly mean? Jack turned, yearning for answers as the next chapter loomed, both terrifying and exhilarating. Would they uncover something that could turn the tide, or would it simply lead to more complications? The air buzzed with possibilities, leaving him hanging on the edge of hope and uncertainty. Jack turned to face the newcomer, his heart pounding. It was Mark, an old friend from high school who had taken up a tech job in the city only to return home after hearing the news about the shipyard. His familiar face shone with determination, but Jack noticed the anxiety in his eyes. "Mark, what is going on? What do you have?" Jack asked, hoping for a breakthrough. Mark glanced at the corporate representatives, then stepped closer, lowering his voice. "I heard whispers. They're planning something big, Jack. A merger that could push us out. They're looking to close the shipyard for good and relocate everything to a cheaper market." Jack's stomach dropped. The implications were staggering. It wasn't just about losing jobs, it was about losing their community. The shipyard was their home, a place of dreams and blood, sweat, and tears. What do we do? How can we stop them? Mark pulled out his phone, quickly flicking through screens. "I've been digging around. There are potential investors interested in keeping us afloat. But they're backing off because of this merger. We need to show them we're worth it. They want to see passion, real commitment from this community." Jack felt a spark of hope ignite within him, but it was quickly overshadowed by fear. Show passion? The fight was already exhausting. Would they have the energy to rally everyone again? He looked around, at the faces in the crowd, determined, but weary. This wasn't just about them anymore, it was about their children, their future. "Can you set up a meeting?" Jack asked, urgency in his voice. "We need to rally everyone. We need a plan." "Absolutely," Mark nodded. "We can gather support, share our stories, and make it clear this isn't just a profit margin for them. We are real people with lives intertwined in this place." Feeling the weight of the moment, Jack rallied the crowd again, positioning himself as the voice of action. "Everyone, listen," he shouted, drawing the eyes of the workers. "This fight isn't over. There's a way we can fight back, but we have to act now." The energy in the crowd shifted from despair to a rush of adrenaline. Jack saw the spark in their eyes, the realization that defeat was not their only option. Karen stepped next to Jack, her earlier resolve returning. "We need your voices. Your stories. We need to come together to show them who we are. We're not just workers, we're families who believe in our futures." Jack's heart soared as he watched fists pump in the air, as cheers rose to meet the sky. It felt like the shipyard itself was awakening, filled with the life that had been threatened. As the chant rallied, Jack felt Mark's hand on his shoulder. "Let's push this hard, Jack. We can't let them take our home without a fight. We owe that to every person here. They deserve to know what's happening." With renewed determination, Jack led the charge, the crowd surging forward like one unified force. They would share their stories with the community, make their case loud and clear, but just as Jack began to feel the weight of hope lifting them higher, Sarah pulled him aside, her brow furrowed. "Jack, What if we can't reach those investors? What if it's just too late? Her vulnerability struck a chord. He searched her eyes, looking for an answer that he didn't have. We'll make it happen, Sarah. We have to. But deep inside, doubt lingered. What if their battle was merely a wave against a mountain? The energy of the crowd began to echo in his ears again, and he raised his voice once more. Together, we can take on anything. We'll fight for every single job, for our families, for our lives. With the rally regaining strength, Jack felt the familiar surge of hope returning. He looked back at Mark, who nodded with conviction. This was their moment to act, to expose the truth about what was happening. And just when they thought things were about to peak, another figure emerged from the crowd, someone none of them expected. I know something you all need to hear. Would this revelation change everything? Would it inject a new life into their fight? The uncertainty loomed, thickening the air with anticipation. The crowd hushed, eyes shifting to the newcomer. A woman stepped forward, her long hair glinting in the fading sunlight. Jack squinted, trying to place her. It was Julie, a former union leader with a reputation that preceded her. The whispers about her disappearance had circulated for years, like fog rolling in the early morning. Jack felt a mix of relief and suspicion. What do you know, Julie? He asked, stepping towards her. Everyone leaned in, anticipation hanging heavy in the air. I've been doing my own digging, she started, her voice steady but urgent. The merger is indeed happening, but there's more. There are connections we can leverage. People who want to invest but need to understand the gravity of what we're risking here. Jack's heartbeat quickened. Hope sparkled along with fear. Could they trust her? Julie had always been a fierce advocate for the workers, but the years had changed them both. Investors need a story, she continued, glancing around the crowd. They need to see why this shipyard matters beyond dollars and cents. It's about the knowledge passed down through generations. It's about families who have built their lives here. Mark stepped closer, clasping Jack's shoulder. We can tell that story, Jack. We have everything to gain by working with her. Jack glanced at Julie. What's your plan? We'll set up a community gathering, she said, her confidence bubbling over. Invite local leaders, potential investors, anyone who'll listen. We can draft proposals, gather testimonials, and show them the heart of the shipyard. With a nod from Jack, the crowd buzzed with chatter. Ideas flowed. Karen was already huddled with a group, writing down family stories. Some recalled building their first boats, while others shared struggles of loss and resilience. Jack felt electricity in the air. This was it. This was the unity they needed. People who had grown tired were finding strength again, reminding him of their purpose, but Julie's eyes looked distant. There's one more thing, she said, pulling Jack aside. The investors I've talked to have ties to the corporate office. If we go in unprepared, it could backfire? Jack repeated, uneasy. What do you mean? They're expecting us to come in desperate. They'll use our fear against us. We have to show them we're not only fighting for our jobs, we're fighting to preserve a legacy. As Jack stood there, the weight of her words sank in. They weren't just defenders of jobs, they were the guardians of a history that framed their lives. The shipyard meant everything, not just the work, but the very identity of the community. Okay, he said, determination hardening in his voice. We'll prepare a strong case. We'll tell them it's not just about profit margins, it's about keeping families whole. We can do this. As the sun dipped lower, painting the sky in rich oranges and purples, the crowd transformed into a sea of determination. They were ready to take their stories to those who mattered, to weave a narrative that could touch hearts. Just as he was about to address the assembled workers again, Sarah approached. Jack, she said, her voice shaky, what if the investors side with the corporation? What if they don't care? Jack swallowed hard. He could feel the uncertainty creeping in again. Then we'll show them they're making a mistake. We can't give up. We've built this place together, and we can't let it go without a fight. The energy surged once more, but the shadows of doubt remained. With every story they shared, every moment of defiance, they would have to prove their worth against the odds, but as Jack stepped back, preparing to rally the troops anew, a loud shout pierced the air. "They're coming for us. Corporate is here." The crowd erupted into a frenzy of murmurs and gasps. "Stay calm," Jack shouted. "Stay together." What were they about to face? Would this confrontation shake their resolve, or would it ignite a fire they didn't know they had? The air was thick with apprehension, and Jack's heart raced. The real battle was just beginning. The sound of footsteps echoed in the distance, growing louder as a group of sleek black cars rolled into view. Jack's heart sank. Corporate wasn't just sending a representative, they were sending a message. A show of power, a reminder of what was at stake. He felt a tension knot in his stomach. Was he ready for this? "Keep your cool," he urged under his breath, glancing at Julie, who stood beside him, fear flickering in her eyes. She'd been away from this world for too long, he thought. Would she still have the same fire? As the cars came to a stop, two well-dressed figures stepped out, flanked by a couple of intimidating security personnel. Jack recognized them instantly. It was Peter, the corporate vice president, and his assistant, Linda. They both wore expressions that screamed indifference, eyes cold under perfectly groomed brows. Peter strode forward, hands shoved deep in his suit pockets. Well, what's this? A gathering of the eager?" His voice dripped with sarcasm, sending a shiver through the crowd. Jack clenched his fists, pushing through the crowd to stand at the front. "This isn't a gathering, Peter. This is us standing up for our lives, our history, and our future." The whispers rippled through the assembly. Jack could sense the fresh spark of unity igniting among the workers around him. He caught Sarah's eye, a hint of confidence in her gaze. Peter exchanged a look with Linda, clearly unfazed. "Let us be real, Jack. Do you really think a few stories from the past are going to sway investors? It's about numbers, not nostalgia." Jack took a step closer, feeling the weight of every worker's eyes on him. The stakes were real, and they needed to show this man that they were more than just statistics. "You may think it's just about numbers, but it's about lives. It's about the heart of this community." Julie joined Jack, her voice ringing with strength. "You say numbers, we say families. You see jobs, we see generations. Invest in our workers, and you'll get loyalty like no other." Silence wrapped around the crowd. For a moment, Jack couldn't tell if it was fear or hope they were feeling. But then a few voices joined in, stories of fathers, children, and dreams crafted on the same shores. Each tale was a brick in the wall they were building against corporate pressure. Linda moved closer, her gaze scanning the crowd. "You might think you're making an impact here, but let us be straightforward. If you don't have a solid plan? Jack interrupted, nearly shouting now. "We're not going to let you dictate our worth with your spreadsheets. We've lived, we've fought, and we've built something valuable here. You don't just erase that." The tension in the air was palpable. Jack's voice cracked slightly, but he wouldn't back down. This was a fight for more than just jobs. It was about pride, dignity, and the legacy of their ancestors. Peter snickered, adjusting his tie. "I've heard a lot of passion. But passion doesn't pay the bills. Passion builds ships." A voice shouted from the back, and then more voices echoed, growing louder, a chorus of support rising in defiance of the corporate coldness. Jack felt a rush of triumph, a fierce kindling of spirit among the workers. "Enough!" Peter barked. Jack could see irritation flashing across his face, but the crowd was moving closer together, emboldened. Linda stepped forward, her expression hardening. "You have one chance to outline your strategy. Do it, or face the consequences. Consequences? Jack repeated, heart thumping against his ribs. What do you think happens here? Doesn't it matter? That the lives we live are expendable? He looked around, the hope around them now ignited. Would they really have to go toe-to-toe with the giants of industry? As he looked into Julie's eyes, he realized that this wasn't just for survival anymore. It was about belief, action, and community. He raised a hand, feeling the warmth of each person beside him. We'll show you our strategy. We'll show you that we're more than just numbers. We're a family, and together, we're unstoppable. As the crowd rallied behind him, the air shifted, and Jack could almost taste victory. But before he could catch his breath, a low rumble of noise broke through from the back of the mob. What's that? Someone shouted, and the crowd turned towards the source of the disturbance. Jack's stomach dropped. More corporate reinforcements? He thought, his heart racing once again. What was unfolding behind them could change everything. Would they be able to hold their ground when faced with the whole force of corporate might? The rumble of voices grew louder, a chaotic wave breaking through the crowd. Jack turned to see a line of black SUVs rolling up to the curb, followed by officers in dark suits stepping out, each one an imposing figure. His heart sank deeper as the realization dawned. This wasn't just intimidation. They were here to flex their muscles, to sow fear among the townsfolk gathered for their peaceful protest. Jack felt the tension spike. A chorus of whispers swept through the crowd, a ripple of anxiety that threatened to drown their newfound courage. But then he remembered, they weren't just bodies in the street, they were a community banding together to protect what mattered most. Rather than scatter in fear, they needed to stand taller, to shine brighter. Listen. We're not afraid of what they bring. Jack shouted, searching the faces around him. He could see the uncertainty, the flicker of fear, but also a glint of resolve. They think they can buy us out and shatter our hopes. But they don't know our strength. This is our home, and we will defend it. The shouts that followed rang out not just as words but as a declaration, a united force fueled by love and determination. Jack, are you out of your mind? Peter scoffed, rolling his eyes. You think this little neighborhood spirit of yours can withstand the corporate machine? You think you're real contenders here? One of the suit-clad officers stepped forward with a menacing grin, scanning the crowd like a hawk checking for prey. The mood in the air felt charged with electricity, an impending storm. Yeah, we are. Came a voice from somewhere near the front, followed by a wave of agreement that echoed through the crowd. We're not just workers. We're family. We're the people who built this place. Jack could feel it rising, the strength that came not just from numbers but from shared history, the collective heartbeat of those standing beside him. Tell that to the investors, Linda retorted, but it sounded more like desperation than confidence. Jack caught sight of Sarah, eyes fierce with determination, squeezing her fist for emphasis. He knew then that they could turn this tide. We'll show them, together. Jack called, noticing a few timid faces slowly shifting to expressions of solidarity, tiny flickers of courage sparking into flame. What we have here are stories, our years of hard work. It means something. And we'll make them see it. He felt the warmth of Sarah's hand tighten in his as he continued, the words pouring from his heart. Every job saved is a family saved. This shipyard isn't just steel and machinery, it's where we've raised our kids, built dreams, and woven our lives together. They may have money, but we have something they can never buy: our community spirit. Yeah. Echoed a voice from the crowd, followed by a wave of murmurs building into a powerful roar. Jack felt his pulse quicken. Each cheer solidified their resolve, and fear faded away, replaced by flames of defiance. Then, as the corporate representatives attempted to regain their poise, Jack struck with a new plan. They are here to intimidate us, and we won't let that happen. We will meet with those investors, we will present our case, and we will show them the heart behind this shipyard, behind every face here. He gestured broadly to the crowd, eyes alight with passion. Every voice matters. Let us raise them together and show how we can all come together to build our future. The crowd was buzzing, excitement surging through bodies like wildfire. Jack began to realize they weren't just a fight against corporate greed, they were a movement, an echo of their ancestors who had struggled for every foundation beneath them. Just then, a voice from the side yelled, "I've got a story." And the crowd shifted expectantly. "I worked here for 30 years. My father worked here. This place is our legacy." Cheers erupted again, one voice after another, recounting their experiences, their pain, and their love for their town. The air electric with shared memories and dreams. With each story, Jack felt the fire grow, emboldening their cause. But suddenly, a realization struck him hard. They had to act quickly. The corporate suits wouldn't take long to regroup and strike back with their marketing machine. "We need to organize," he shouted over the swelling energy. "Let us meet tomorrow. Bring your families, bring your stories. We'll remind everyone of what we're fighting for." "That's right," Julie said, stepping beside him, her face passionate and alive. "We're going to show them our struggles, our triumphs. Let us flood social media, picket outside their offices, and make sure this community knows they have a choice." As the crowd rallied behind this new plan, Jack winked at Sarah, feeling the weight of hope resurface between them. "Are we ready to fight for our future?" he called, the roar that followed cascading through the air like an anthem. They weren't just defending their livelihoods, they were stepping forward as guardians of their legacy. The corporate representatives took a step back, bewildered by the fire ignited among these once timid townsfolk. Jack sensed the tide turning, a wave of passionate chaos directed against their opposition. The doubts that had previously whispered now faded into the background, eclipsed by the certainty of a unified front. Jack's heart swelled as he watched their faces light up, arms raised triumphantly, united under a common purpose. They were not just fighting for a shipyard, they were fighting for their families, their stories, and their lives. As the sun began to set, painting the sky in warm golds and reds, the crowd surged forth, marching toward their hopes, their hearts in synchronization. This moment would be a milestone in the fight, a testament to the power of unity. "This is just the beginning," Jack whispered to Sarah, his heart pounding with hope as he grasped her hand tightly. With her by his side, he knew they could weather any storm, face any giant. Together, they would protect this shipyard and all it represented. And with one last glance toward the corporate representatives standing bewildered in the background, Jack took a deep breath. The fight was on. The rally strengthened their bond. It was time to take the movement to greater heights. They would share their stories, flood the meetings with heart, and move forward as one. But before they stepped into that future, Jack turned to the audience, his friends, family, and fellow sailors. "Let us not waste a single moment, everyone. They don't define us. Let them know we're coming." A final unified shout erupted from his community, echoing their strength as they surged forward, ready to reclaim their home. In that glorious moment, Jack felt the pulse of the shipyard beat strong in his chest. United, they would fight. United, they would thrive. This is your moment. Don't wait another second. Subscribe immediately to the channel so you don't miss the exclusive stories ahead. Your support is crucial. Leave a like now to feed the algorithm. Comment below with your reactions and let us know how this battle inspired you. And share instantly with at least 5 friends who need to see how a community can transform. Stand up and be counted, because only true fans understand the importance of supporting this channel through every action.